Hey everyone, I'm so sad that I can't be there today, but I am really glad that you're going to continue to meet and carry on the really important conversation of deconstructing patriarchal masculinity. I want to do a little bit of an intro and talk about something that I think is really important in this conversation, and I hope it feels good conversation among yourselves. When I was a kid, my favorite movie I watched over and over and over again was Sleeping Beauty. And one of the things that I loved about that movie was Prince Philip. Prince Philip was my hero, and I got to watch him be the hero, go in and rescue the woman and fight off dragons and fight through the thorns and break free from prison. And I wanted to be Prince Philip. That was the content I was getting early on. So I want to talk today a little bit about media consumption, because for me, almost all of the media that I consumed growing up was telling the story of men. It was centering men in a very specific way. And I think something about how we tell stories about men, it cultivates empathy. It shows us the inner struggle that men are dealing with and why it's so hard to get on with life. And we cultivate empathy for men's struggles by watching these stories that do a beautiful job depicting the inner world and the inner turmoil and the inner struggle that men have. The problem is, I've never had to do that for women. I'd never consumed enough content about women, at least growing up, that I was cultivating that empathy in me for a woman's internal struggle. It just wasn't the stories I was listening to. Even in the Sleeping Beauty story, it's supposed to be about Sleeping Beauty, right? But she's the passive recipient of the action that's happening around her, whereas Prince Philip is the one that's taking action, who's doing something. Aurora is just kind of receiving actions done to her. She doesn't have agency. It's not telling a woman's story of like her own agency, her own personhood. What does it look like for her to take ownership of her life? Basically, it just shows her being sad that she doesn't get the man that she wants. That's the entire storyline for her. She's sad that she can't have this love that she discovered in the woods and met one time. And she's devastated by that. And that's like the whole story arc for her. And the media that we consume is teaching us about ourselves. It's reflecting back what we see, what's actually happening in the world, but it's also creating a future world, because as people and society consume the same media together, it's like this communal act of media consumption. We are training our brains to think about ourselves and the world in a certain way. One of my great frustrations when talking to people about women and stories that portray women is that a lot of times men will say that Ripley from Alien is like the pinnacle of like a well-written woman. And I hate that, because that character was actually written agender. They didn't have a gender for that character when it was written. It was just a human story. So that character, although acted by a woman, is not telling a woman's story. It's telling a human story. And there are a lot of pieces of that character that mirror the masculine experience of the world more than they mirror a feminine experience of the world. But a lot of times men struggle to empathize and connect with female characters, with women who aren't masculine, who aren't, assassin spies, or like who aren't, drinking beers at the bar. Like, men will feel more connection to women who are portrayed in media who demonstrate what our society has deemed as masculine. And we see that reflected as well in like business culture in our society, where the women who get promoted tend to be women who adopt patriarchal masculine traits and are playing out those values in the office setting. But I remember when I was growing up, when the movie Titanic came out, there was a whole movement in my like youth group, my church youth group, where the older guys made it very clear that if you watched Titanic, you were a girl. That there was something about that stripped away your masculinity and made you feminine, and it made you a girl. And Titanic is a beautiful movie in that it centers Rose. The entire story is about her, and the men are support characters. They are not the center of the story. It's her story, and they do a really great job giving her agency, giving her her own choices and her own power, and kind of taking ownership of her own life. It's actually a really wonderful, beautiful story. But I remember when it first came out, I didn't want to watch it because I didn't want to be considered a girl, and there was this unspoken contract in society, this unspoken social contract that that men don't listen to women's stories, men don't like chick flicks, men don't watch or engage with music or movies or read books that are about women, that center women, or that are written by women. And I think it's really important to consider how that has shaped our ability as people conditioned as men to empathize with women. If we're not consuming stories that are centering women, that are written by women, not women characters that are written by men in a very male gaze sort of way, but women's stories written by women, for women, about women, to really help us understand what it's like to exist as a woman in this world, because those stories are a wonderful picture into humanity, and specifically the type of humanity that has been labeled feminine, and how, like, what kind of struggles does that create for women as they navigate in the world? What are the things that they have to deal with on a regular basis?